Super trainers. How did we get here and what are they? I think to answer that question, we need to go back and talk about what has happened over the past 7 or 8 years with super shoes, tech in running shoes, and just a couple key inflection points and moments in running over the past few years that I think have influenced where we are right now in the middle of 2023 with these new super trainers. So if you've been around running for a long time, you're going to remember quite a bit of this. If you're new to running, this should be an interesting story for you, and otherwise I think this really will set the stage for why we're seeing super trainers now and why they look the way they do. It all starts with the men's Olympic marathon at the Rio Games in 2016. This was where Eliud Kipchoge wins the gold medal, but the entire podium, all 3 medals were in Nike Vaporfly prototypes. And then around the games in general, between all the running disciplines and track and field, there was a big sort of outcry around Nike's super shoes. So this is where that whole conversation around tech in running really kicks off. The next event was almost a year later in May 6, 2017. This was the original Breaking 2. This is where Eliud Kipchoge, again, with 2 other athletes, tried to break 2. They didn't. But this is where the world, for the first time, saw the actual Vaporflies, the ones that were released, which, again, were released as a family. So we had the Vaporfly 4%, we had the Zoomfly, the Peg 34, then the Vaporfly Elite, which was really the elite level shoe. Now, I don't think a lot of people remember this, but these shoes were released as a family. And I think a lot of people credit the Zoomfly as being the originator of the super trainer type of shoe. But I would disagree. The Zoomfly was a tempo trainer, and tempo trainers were not new. They existed prior to super shoes, but I think Nike really redefined what a tempo trainer is here, and they took the tech from the Vaporfly 4%, put it into a faster trainer, but the faster trainer was meant to work in conjunction with that everyday daily trainer, which is why the Peg 34 is shown here. So over the next 2 years, if you went anywhere on running social media or anywhere online where they talked about running, all you heard was Cheaterfly, ban them. You had tons of people debating, technology and running. And initially it had just started as just a bunch of people talking on forums, but eventually became the industry. The industry was just trying to, I think at this time, just come out with any product that matched, where Nike was with the Vaporfly 4%. And we saw a lot of horrible shoes at this time. We saw a lot of prototypes on elite and pro level runners in all those major races. And it was just chaos online. Everything was ban them, Cheaterfly, all of that. So the next important step here would be on October 12th, 2019. This was the second Breaking 2 event, but what became known as the Ineos 159. This is where Eliud actually broke the 2-hour barrier. But I think the real key photo out of this that really caused the most uproar was this. This is where we got the first good look at the Alphafly. At the time, we didn't know what it was called, and Eliud was the only person in these shoes because all the paces around Eliud through the entire event were in Next Percents. But this shoe, I think, really made a lot of brands, a lot of the industry freak out because there were all sorts of rumors around what was in this shoe. There was 2 or 3 plates in this with all these hidden AirPods, and all this other tech in there that obviously the only reason Eliud did this was because of the shoes. It really just took what was going on online and made everyone freak out, made the industry freak out. This single photo, I think, made the entire industry just kind of lose its mind. The net of that was that World Athletics eventually stepped in a couple months later. This was the end of January 2020 with clear regulations on what a shoe that would be legal for marathon road racing would be, or any kind of road racing actually. So when we talk about a legal running shoe, these are what we're talking about, and this is where it comes from. So the 40 mil stack height, the fact that it can only have 1 stiff plate, doesn't say what the plate has to be, just can only have 1 of them. And the fact that it has to be widely available, meaning consumers can buy it, aka no prototypes. Now, again, tons of outcry on this. I think the industry was really, again, losing its mind. But ultimately, The Nike shoes, the Next Percent, and the new Alpha Fly were not banned because they were within the regulations. Now, about 2 weeks later, actually about a week later, Nike had their 2020 innovations launch, which I think this is the other thing that made the entire industry freak out, because Nike showcased all of their Olympic innovations here. So it wasn't just a running event. They had all the basketball, the skateboarding, all the other events that Nike had Nike athletes in. But as runners, obviously we care the most about running. And I think there were 3 shoes in here that really were the inflection point for the entire industry. This is where we finally learned about the Alpha Fly. We got all the specs, we got all the details about it. And I think that opened the door to brands really looking at, oh, there could be a lot more tech here, and there's a lot more we can do with geometries and, just in general how the shoe works. We don't have to just copy what they did with the Vaporfly 4%. We also saw the Tempo Next Percent, which was the training partner to the Alpha Fly. Now, this shoe, I would make the argument that this is actually the father of all super trainers, because this was the super trainer that had all of the tech in it. It was actually an illegal shoe because the stack height was over 40 mil. This was the shoe that I think really showed where trainers can go. And I remember a lot of the Nike marketing around this shoe being that this is a trainer that will not hold you back. They never said that this is the one trainer rule them all, meaning you should do all your running in this shoe, but they said that it was a very versatile trainer that will never hold you back from your potential. So if you're training in this and you're racing the Alpha Fly, that's the ultimate combination. And I definitely remember a lot of marketing around that. The other shoe, and this really set the track and field world on fire, and I think it also gave the road running world a sigh of relief, actually, is that the Viperfly was shown here as well. Now, this shoe caused a whole bunch of uproar because, as you can see, there's multiple plates in that thing, and it never saw the light of day. But I think collectively the industry again saw that, and they're like, oh, there's a lot of room for different approaches, different tech in running shoes. And even though the Vaporfly never happened, parts of it happened in other shoes. I think, again, it showed the power of Nike innovation, but it also showed the power of where running shoes could go. Also, around the same time, December 2019 and January 2020, we saw Saucony release the Endorphin line. Again, taking a page from the Nike playbook by putting a family out there, but they had the Racer, the Trainer, and the Daily Trainer. I would also say the Endorphin Speed is probably the other father of the Super Trainer, because it was super impactful, where the Tempo Next Percent was sort of the crazy bleeding edge technology across the board. The Endorphin Speed took a lot of the the PBX foam, the plate, and they put it in a package that was frankly very usable for a lot of runners. And that's why the Endorphin series has been so well loved. Now, the last event that really sort of, I think, put the nail in the coffin as far as all the drama around super shoes was the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials on February 29th, 2020. This was where we saw Nike give all the participants a pair of Alpha Flies. So they gave, I think, 725 participants between the men's and women's races. They gave them all Alpha Flies to kind of level the playing field, because we had a lot of athletes complaining that Nike athletes had an unfair advantage, because their brands weren't catching up, et cetera, et cetera. But also for all the other brands, we saw a lot of prototypes on the feet of these racers, and a lot of sort of trickiness around, well, they release a version to the consumer, but then they put their athletes in the next version and they say that they're the same version. All sorts of trickiness on this. But I would say after this event, the whole conversation around, are super shoes good for the sport? Are they here to stay? Is tech important in running? All of that sort of ended. This was the end of it, because after this, I think it was clear that the tech's there to stay, and super shoes were also here to stay. 2017, the super shoe was born, at least to consumers, and we got the first Tempo trainer. So this was the Vaporfly 4% and the Zoomfly. 2020 comes along and we get the Alpha Fly and the Tempo Next Percent, and we also get the endorphin. So again, I'm giving Saucony credit here because I think the endorphin also is an important thing when we're talking about tech and innovation in running. And obviously we have the World Athletics regulations. So the field is set now. We have all the components, we have the regulations, and I think everything that happens from here is the result of the Alpha Fly, the Tempo Next Percent, and the endorphin, specifically the endorphin speed. So the first thing that I'll say is if we fast forward to 2023, where we are now, we have super shoes. Super shoes are still around, and I think these four are probably the most successful that we have currently. Yes, there's some other ones that will pop up in results every once in a while, but I think everyone would say that the four here are the ones that are most successful right now. But each one of these has a very different approach to technology and how they're using tech within the shoe itself. And I think it's super interesting where we are with super shoes right now. We also have amazing tempo trainers still, things like the Asics Magic Speed 3, which is just a very classic tempo trainer all the way up to the Boston 12, which I think is beginning to define this new category. Now, I am pointing to 2020 as the inflection point, and specifically, like I said, the Alpha Fly, the Tempo Next Percent, and the endorphin speed. Now, where I think the Alpha Fly really set a bar was that there can be a lot of tech in running, and there's a lot of space to explore what that is. And I think no brand took that further than Adidas with the Prime X, to the point where I think that creates a whole other category. I'm calling it the hyper shoe, mostly because I need a name, because I think it's very different than a super shoe, but it's also, I think people have been including the Prime X in the super trainer category. I think it's totally different. The Prime X really is Adidas doing that what if. What if there's no limits? What if there's no regulations? What if you've never seen a running shoe before? What could it be in 2023? And that's really the Prime X. In fact, Adidas is even taking it another step forward this year by creating an even more crazy version of the Prime X with the Prime X 2 Strung, which should be even more bonkers. But I think the hyper shoe idea is really interesting because that's really the bleeding edge of where tech is in running right now. And I think for Adidas, they're taking a lot of learnings from that. They're trickling it down into their legal super shoe, the Adios Pro 3 platform. And I think that's been a really interesting space for running to explore. And I do think we're going to see other brands release shoes that are up there. I expect something from Nike and probably Asics fairly soon in that category. Now, some could say with the hyper shoe that Nike started that all the way back with the Vaporfly Elite. I'm not trying to give Nike props for everything here, but again, Nike showed a family of bleeding edge down to training, and I think that's where the entire industry is right now, and I think that's super interesting. But back to super trainers, again, I think the Tempo Next Percent and the endorphin speed specifically become the fathers or the mom and dad of super trainers. And I think those two shoes now have really directly influenced where we are with the super trainer for a few reasons. If we look at what a super trainer is, a super trainer is really taking inputs from all the shoes that you see on this screen. It's taking the bleeding edge tech from the hyper shoe. It's taking all the performance tech out of a super shoe, and it's taking daily trainers, all the stuff that's being done with daily trainers, and it's putting it all into one package. And that's actually quite interesting. It's trying to make innovation for everyone, which I think is really what the mission of a super trainer is trying to take the best of all other running shoes and make the one shoe to rule them all. When we're looking at super trainers specifically, I think the four that you see here are the four most successful or the four most representative of the category right now. I think the Boston 12 is a really interesting example. And in fact, it's really nice to see the Boston series back to what the Boston used to be, of the one shoe that you could train and race in. That was the Boston 8 and 9. I think now with the Boston 12, it's really shown that this is a shoe that you can do all of your training in from slow to fast, and you could race in it because it has the same carbon rod technology that the Adios Pro 3 has, but it's in a package that's more usable across a lot more stuff. But if you're going to pair this with the Adios Pro 3, it's a great sort of combination. And I think that's why you're seeing the Boston 12 being on the top of many people's shoe of the year list right now. I think another super interesting shoe in the super trainer category is the Asics Super Blast. Now, I think some people have put that in what I'm calling the hyper shoe category. I don't think that's what it is, though. I don't think that's Asics doing what if. I think that's more Asics doubling down on their core technology. So they're taking the best out of the Metaspeed platform, and they're taking their Nova Blast platform, which is their daily trainer, really, and they're putting that together into a new super trainer that is extremely versatile. It is the shoe you can do all of your training in, and you could race in. And I think, honestly, the Super Blast may be the best example of the super trainer that we have right now. And I think there's another key point with the Super Blast is there's no carbon plate. There's no plate at all in that shoe. And I think that's showing that super trainers don't have to have a plate in them. Whereas with the Hoka Mach X and the Saucony Kinvara Pro, which I have a whole video about both those shoes. There'll be a card on the screen, I'll link in the description. Go watch that video if you want my full thoughts on both those shoes. But both those shoes feel like we're back to put a plate in it. We're there for tech's sake, tech sells, all of that sort of stuff. And they do feel very iterative from what the Tempo Next Percent and the Endorphin Speed already did over 3 years ago. But when we're looking at the range of current super trainers, again, Boston 12, super interesting. Super Blast, super interesting. But again, if you look at some other shoes on this screen, you see all those great daily trainers from a Peg to a Nova Blast to an Invincible. They all have a lot of influences on the super trainer area. And then, what Puma and Asics are doing with their more classic tempo trainers, those also impacted. So there you go. That's how I think we've got to super trainers. Now, I would encourage you to go check out the video I did about the Hoka Mach X and the Saucony Kinvara Pro, because in the comments of that video, there's a really interesting conversation, a lot of interesting feedback around both of those shoes and super trainers in general, which is really what instigated me to come back and make this video, because I can't stop thinking about this category. So let me know in the comments what you think about super trainers. Is it tech for tech's sake? Is there actual valid use there? Do you like them? Do you run in them? Let me know what you think, because I love the comments and the dialogue and the conversation about all of this stuff. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you like this content, subscribe. You'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I'm always appreciative of. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.